this prison where leaders are putting on this sort of pressure to make sure that we get there actually has that opposite effect where people are then pulling back saying, hey, I don't want to commit. And being able to get out of that, being that open door leader, that is really the path out.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, and I'm so glad you are here today. Today, my guest is George Pesansky. He is a recognized leader in operational excellence with a career spanning 30 years based on performance optimization. And he is amazing. In fact, he tells me in the episode that he is the best kept secret in process improvement. And I love that because I want to continue to improve processes here at Stone Age. And I just think it's so amazing that he has built up this really cool practice and wrote a really cool book called Super Performance that's coming out in late September. And I just think that you're really going to get a lot from this interview. George is just such a humble guy. And he is chocked full of great tips on how to be a super performer. And we dive into that in this episode. So hang tight and I'll be right back with George. All right. Welcome back, everyone. I have my guest, George Pesansky, with me. George, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
We have lots to unpack here because you love talking about super performance. I love this topic because I also love super performance, and I can't wait to pick your brain on this. But before we jump into your book that's coming out here soon, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to be where you are today.
Well, thank you. I have had the most unusual journey. I started off out of college as an Army officer and spent a few years in that kind of leadership role and decided to transition when I knew I was no longer going to directly lead soldiers and ended up working in some corporate roles, getting exposed to the automotive industry and then working for an adhesives company that took me all over the world, all over the US, exposed me to all kinds of manufacturing. If you think about it, almost anything that's made uses glue. So I've been in just so many different factories and facilities. In that role, I had the chance to get involved in continuous improvement, lean manufacturing, Six Sigma, and discovered it was my passion, helping organizations be better, helping people be better. And that's how I founded myblendedlearning.com. For really the last almost 20 years, we've been providing those solutions to companies. And that's what super performance is all about. It's really my 30-year journey and rolling all that up.
And did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur and do your own thing, or did you figure this out along the way?
I definitely did not think of myself ever as an entrepreneur, but when I sat down to put together the book, I realized when I was 8 years old, I started a pretty significant lawn mowing operation and was taking care of not just the ones in my neighborhood, but the neighbors' neighbors, and got involved with the real estate companies. And I thought at that age, that was what I did so well. And as I look at my career, it has really been entrepreneurial. And even when I was in large companies, there's a great book called Intrapreneuring. I really
Mhm.
felt like I was always that square peg in those organizations, pushing and asking and wanting. And I think that's how I ended up on my own. And so thankful that I did.
I love the idea of entrepreneurship. We are an employee-owned company here at Stone Age. You can see we've got the own it. Everything is about owning it
Yeah,
here and teaching people how
absolutely.
to think and act like owners. And I have a lot of my employees say that I don't feel like I'm entrepreneurial, but you are because we're teaching you how to think and act like owners. It's about the initiative that you have and the innovation and the raising your hand to say, I'll go first. And it's looking for continuous improvement, looking for ways to make things better. And that's what entrepreneurialism is about. Yeah, there's some risk taking. And maybe as an employee, you don't take those risks that you would as an entrepreneur going out and starting a company, but you can still have that mindset. I appreciate you bringing that up.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think a lot of people who may never take that leap to try something out on their own, even if it's something maybe on the side or something that they're supporting their family, they don't realize that you're really putting your hands into your own ability, your own
Yeah.
willingness to work. And often when you're in an organization, you're putting things a lot in other people's hands. So there's actually a lot less risk, in my opinion.
I like that. That's a good reframing there. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about your book, Super Performance. So, what inspired you to write it? You know, you have 30 years of working in corporate and then with your own clients. So give us a little bit of the backstory of what inspired you to write the book.
I actually used to have like an inside kind of a dark humor joke that I'm never here to sell you my book. When I work with a company, work with a client, I'd always say, I'm not one of those guys who's going to be pitching his book. It kind of is something I sort of got known for a little bit. You're like the guy who doesn't have a book. Yeah, that's me. And I had a really good friend sit me down and say, you might be the best kept secret in process improvement. And I said, well, I appreciate that, but I don't know what you mean by that. And he said, nobody knows what you're doing other than your clients. And there's so much here that can benefit people who would never be able to afford it. Smaller businesses, organizations that may not have the structured programs that I've supported and worked with for so many years. You really have to get this message out and you really have to share it. And I thought that's exactly what a good purpose in life can be. So we sat down to get that message out and to try to really put together the story of how you can have the same level of performance some of the biggest companies in the world have been able to enjoy.
I love that. So, do you feel that by writing the book that you increased your level of purpose and meaning?
It definitely sharpened my focus around what I believe has helped me be successful. And one of the key things of the book Super Performance is all about is identifying what I call the root causes of your success. And this was an exercise in taking my own medicine because in order to put a work out there that I wanted to be proud of, I didn't want it to be things that other people have already said. So I had to ask myself, what has helped me? What has helped the people I work with, the organizations and the teams have success that is not something that people would already maybe realize or know or do? And that really focused me. And that has actually, in my opinion, led to me having even more success in my practice because it's really sharpened what I know is something that's helpful, something that's useful. I may not have fully appreciated before I wrote the book.
And you asked me the question as we were figuring out about you coming onto the show as a guest,
Yeah.
and I thought a lot about that. What is the root cause of my success? And I don't know that if you can like pinpoint one thing, right? Because we're such complex beings. But I really think that for my story, it's this idea of resilience and being able to see how things work in patterns and pulling it together in unique ways and being able to create an inspiring vision. But the foundation of it all is my resilience because
Yeah.
I have done so many things in my life that have knocked me down, the vast majority self-inflicted. And every time it's like I keep bouncing back stronger. Like I'm definitely a wartime CEO.
Yeah.
I operate so much better in crisis. And I think it comes from that resiliency piece. And that's the foundation of being able to say, okay, I'm willing to take this risk. I'm willing to look at all these problems and these pieces of the puzzle and figure out how to put them together and then take this risk on this big vision. But you can't do that without resilience. So anyway, that was my answer after thinking about what you said.
I love that answer. I think it's a great point around this idea of root causes in general is that you don't necessarily always have to understand them all, but
Yeah.
every one you find can really be useful. If it's a root cause of a problem, then obviously we can correct something and make sure it didn't happen again. But in this case, the recognition, your knowledge of how valuable your resilience is
Yeah.
can really shape the kinds of value propositions or things that you do in your organization, knowing that resilience will be key to your success here. You're going into a market or you're going after a brand or a strategy where most people would run away scared. Well, that's your jam, right?
Yeah, exactly. I do a lot of advising on the side, and I just started working with a new client, and he's in a really interesting predicament. And he sent me a message and he was like, "This is such a messy situation, and you didn't even flinch." And I was like, the messier, the better.
Exactly.
You
That's
wanna get the
right.
best performance out of me, put a really tough problem in front of me. It's interesting to see as you dive into this and really understand yourself,
Yeah.
self-awareness is such an important aspect of being a great leader, of being a great self-leader, and you have to be able to understand what has made you successful, what those superpowers are so that you can be that type of performer. So do you
Yeah.
have a way that you walk people through figuring out the root analysis of their success?
There is so much that's written, so many techniques and ways of people doing root cause analysis. If you think about seeing an accident on the highway, the state trooper is doing root
Yeah.
cause analysis on why there was that accident. It's as simple as flipping the script and asking yourself, what is the evidence of what has contributed to the outcome that instead of it being negative, like an automobile accident, it's positive. And
Yeah.
these are the things that have helped me. The common tools, the easiest ones are things like a 5 why
Yeah.
analysis, where you just ask yourself why and
Mhm.
keep digging until you've reached something that is actionable, like your resilience, and recognizing that I can actually focus and find clients that are in really difficult circumstances, or I can write a book that really helps people deal with a very difficult subject because I love that. I'm going to be there right through to the end where other people may not stick in the same way I would.
That's great. The 5 whys is such a valuable exercise in any aspect of your life, whether it's in a
It's
business problem or like, why do I keep making these stupid decisions?
yeah,
Let's jump into the 5 why.
exactly. Yeah, there's always something there.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about some of the principles behind it. So I think that there's 8 principles behind
Yeah.
super performance. Is that correct? What's your favorite one?
Oh boy, that's like asking my favorite child.
Do you
And
have a favorite
yeah,
child?
we never admit it, but maybe we do. I think not just my favorite, but maybe the one that I have witnessed making the biggest difference is a concept I like to call the golden hour. And it also is about flipping the script. We will very often make a list. We will look at all the things that are preventing us or getting in our way or not allowing us to reach the level of success we're looking for. And I like to try to, even in my own day, think about what are those periods of time where things go well for me, where everything works, I feel productive, I'm getting great outcomes. And then how do I now extend that? How do I stretch it so that it's not just an hour? Maybe now it's going to be 2 hours tomorrow instead of 1 hour today. How do I increase the frequency of how many times during the day I can find myself in that place? And what that really does is instead of chasing the millions of reasons why things could go wrong, again, you're coming back to what is the core of what helps me go right and not giving power to these things that usually we can't control. But you do have a lot of control over the things that make you, you, and how you're going to use that time. Whether you're an operator in a manufacturing facility trying to have a record breaking shift, or whether you're an entrepreneur, I think that principle holds up. And I call that your golden hour.
It's interesting how just in both of these threads that we've been going down, how important self-awareness is. It reminds me of a conversation I had with one of my employees, and he wanted to talk to me about some issues that were going on. And I have a super open door policy, and I'll talk to any of my employees about anything. So we met on a weekend and went for a walk. He's like, I don't really understand like what I'm good at and how I bring value to the company. And he asked his manager, who works for us too, and his manager said, "Well, that's your responsibility to figure out," which was a terrible answer, but also kind of true, right? Yes, you need to partner with your manager, but you also have to be able to do that work first. And so I said, think when you go home at the end of the day and you're like, I had a fantastic day because I got X, Y, and Z done. What is it? And so he shared that with me. And I was like, that's the value that you bring, right? That is what your gifts are. Like, that's the simplest way for you to start figuring out how to get more into that golden hour, how to do more of that kind of work that brings you joy, that makes you feel like your work is meaningful, that makes you feel like you're bringing value to the organization. And he was like, wow, I never thought about it. It's that simple? Yeah, but you have to think about it and you have to have that kind of framing around when do you feel really good at work?
Exactly. And when you dig into that sort of 5 why philosophy of something
Yeah.
like that, you realize that I do really well at work when I successfully define the problem, the outcome I'm trying to create. When I just jump in and start working, I get frustrated. But if I know what is this supposed to look like when it's done, then I do really well. Okay. Well, that tells you that's one of the things that help you be successful. That's one of those root causes. So always define your work, always validate it with your stakeholders, always make sure this is the outcome that they want you to achieve. Then go out and do that great thing you do over and over again.
I love that. That is so the ownership mindset. That's the first book that I wrote. You empower, right? Not empower, but empower yourself. When you say, I need this to be successful, then you say, okay, now I'm going to go talk to my manager. I'm going to go talk to my team. I'm going to work to create the type of environment that I can be successful because now I understand it. And that next step is then, like you just said, like going out and having that conversation so that people can understand what you need to be successful. And so many people are missing, and not a lot of leaders, of course, because we're in leadership positions because we have demonstrated our ability to dive in and solve those problems and figure those things out about ourselves and others. Like not all leaders, but for the most part.
Absolutely.
But I do think that a lot of individual contributors who want to be successful might not feel safe or comfortable saying, okay, this is what I need. Now, how do I go talk to my manager about it? And it's so important because to be a super performer, we all start as individual contributors and move our way up into leadership. And so the sooner we can start learning how to lead ourselves by understanding ourselves and being able to articulate, this is what I need to be successful, the faster we're going to create the success that we want.
What you said there struck something that I'd love to share with you because
Yeah.
I spent most of my career not in the boardroom. I'm not that guy who'd be super comfortable kind of putting on the suit. I love putting on my boots and going out on the floor and working with those teams that are trying to get those results. And there's a phenomenon I think you described really well there that I call it the prison of expectations. As leaders, we will sometimes say, you know what, team, we need the ship to go faster. We need these results. We need these outcomes. And they're super important. I care about them a lot. I need you to make this happen for me. So the team starts to feel a lot of pressure
Mhm.
around making sure they produce those outcomes successfully. But at the same time, we make sure that our goals are realistic. So we establish what's the acceptable level of performance that would allow me to be considered doing my job. Maybe it's not everything I could do, but I'm getting there. That is that prison of expectations where when you start talking to those folks, like it sounds like you do so often, that are out in the field doing the work, they'll say, I could actually go a lot faster. I could actually do a lot more. But here's the problem, the goal would change,
Yeah.
the standard would raise. So therefore, I never really increase to that level of performance because if I did, then I'm going to have to do that every day. And of course, that's not realistic. I may not be able to maintain that. This prison where leaders are putting on this sort of pressure to make sure that we get there actually has that opposite effect where people are then pulling back saying, hey, I don't want to commit, and being able to get out of that, being that open door leader, like it sounds like you certainly are, that is really the path out, right? Letting people be able to fail and learn from those failures and correct so that they're always giving that top performance. It's a great concept. It's actually one of those 8 strategies, the prison of expectations.
I love it. Oh my gosh. I feel like I've been a prison of expectations, mostly self my whole life. But I really love this concept because I think that so often leaders don't understand that people can't move at my pace. And that was the prison of expectations that I created. I'm
Mm.
totally good with failure. When you live a life that's on the boundary, you're going to fail, right? You're not going to
So
be a resilient person and have that be the root cause of your success if you're not taking risks and pushing boundaries. I just move at this super fast pace. And because that's the world that I live in, it's hard for me to recognize that other people don't move at that pace and in fact get exhausted by it or scared by it or like we just said, I don't want to do that anymore. I can't operate at that speed all the time. And so that is a modification that I have really had to make myself is to say this is my speed and that's okay and I can live aspects of my life at that speed and I have to be realistic about what this organization can do and what people the pace that people can actually move at so
yeah.
that I don't burn people out, that I don't create that toxic environment of like just constant achieve, 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 achieve. Let's get this done just because that's
Yes.
the pace I move at.
And I think that willingness to listen, that open door kind of policy in manufacturing sites, there's a Japanese, a lean term called gemba, where you go out to the actual place where the work is being done, where the people are doing what's necessary with the sole purpose to listen, learn, and understand, to not go there from a place of a manager or a supervisor to say, this is the way you should be doing your job. These are the things you need to do differently. It's not about telling, it's about learning. And I think that's the key to unlock that prison of expectation. Let's just try to get the best from the people and with the level of effort that we can get them to commit to make. And that means that they're never holding back and they know that they're giving you their all. And it's okay if it sometimes falls short. We're going to figure it out. We'll take that next cycle and do something better next time. And I think that ladder is what everybody goes through to get to the level of excellence.
I love that. And I think the key thing in there is leaders being curious enough to go out and ask those questions. And you absolutely have to be humble and put your ego aside.
Yep.
And what can I possibly learn? But curiosity is such an important leadership trait to be successful, to be willing to say, maybe I don't know the way to lead us through this problem, or maybe I don't really fully understand exactly all the challenges that they're having out on the floor. And I'm going to go be curious and I'm going to ask questions just for the sake of being curious and
Yes.
learning and listening before I go try to formulate how we're going to solve this problem, or even better, help them figure out how to solve their own problem. I think that there are a lot of leaders who just don't have that kind of deep curiosity. And maybe it's laziness, maybe it's I don't want to hear what the real problems are, maybe it's too busy, or all the different excuses that we can have. But to me, curiosity about everybody who works for you, every part of your organization is how you really get to the root of what is going on.
It's so well said. I couldn't agree with you more. You can think of it in maybe a very modern way of talking or listening, of having it be called sort of a main character syndrome, where a lot of leaders think
Yeah.
the organization is revolving around my decisions and my work and my activities and my interventions and my. That leads to so much bottlenecking, and it leads to so many things not being resolved or decided upon because everything has to filter through to that main character. That's not the purpose of this game. The purpose of this game is to have everyone else be the main character and to figure out how each of them are going to do that contribution and have those systems and have that support. And my goal is to make sure those resources and that vision is here. And if they know where we're going and they have the things necessary to get there and I'm supporting them, then we're going to have an amazing journey.
I just had a conversation with one of my executives, and I've been running my company for almost 20 years. And there are things at this point in my career that I can do that I just don't want to do anymore. And it's hard to admit that because, like, the thing that we were talking about was putting in a new operating system within Stone Age to be more efficient. I should talk
Mhm.
to you about how we want to do this. And I told him, I'm not going to pretend that this is something I want to do. I'm
Yeah.
just not going to, because you guys are all going to know that I don't want to do this anyway. And I'm just going to be a bottleneck because this is not where my passion lies. It's not where my skill set lies. And yes, I can do it. I have done it before and I don't want to. I want to create the organizational structure that allows the people who are going to be great at implementing this operating system, because it's so what the company needs, to do it. And
Yes.
I'm going to support it and I'm going to be there, part of it, and I'm going to help hold people accountable, but I'm not going to be the one implementing it. It's just not what I want. And he was like, I really appreciate your candor. But if it all has to come through me, it's going to be a bottleneck. And then I'm going to be doing things that I'm not great at. And I'm going to feel resentful because I don't really want to do it. So I just decided I was going to be honest and say, I don't want to do it. I don't want to
Yeah.
do it. I want it, but I don't want to do it.
I think that perspective is such a healthy one because it is going to make sure that you don't end up intervening in something that is not going to get your attention. In my opinion, there's 3 questions here that are gonna have to get answered, and they're pretty simple. It's the what, the how, and the why.
Yeah.
You're the only one who can articulate the why as the leader of your organization. This is why we need a new operating system, and you're also the one who can articulate what the outcomes of this system
Yeah.
should be, and then the right thing to do is let them figure out how
Yeah.
to achieve those outcomes. It'll work fantastic for you.
I know, and let them be the star of it. And this person who I was talking to, this is so in his wheelhouse and he's excited about it. And yes, we're going to have to make changes organizationally so that he can have time to focus on it. But it's going to be such a great growth opportunity. And I don't have to do it. But I do think that it's really key what you just said, right? If you are going to be the hero of every story, you are going to burn yourself out. You're going to wind up doing things that you shouldn't do because it's not your job, or you shouldn't do because you're not actually good at it.
Yeah.
And a lot of leaders have a hard time letting that go.
Actually, Command Sergeant Maybury, who gave me an endorsement that's on the back of my book, Super Performance, he taught me this lesson when I was a brand new lieutenant, and he was an E5 sergeant, gunner in my tank. And I was just like you. I still am to some degree, wanting to just be that hummingbird moving much faster than any of the other birds can. And he grabbed me by the shoulder and said, "Look, if you're going to do everything, none of us are going to get anything done." And and I didn't appreciate the fact that when you can step away and your organization can operate without you because they know why and they know what the outcomes are you expect, but the day to day operates without you, that's real leadership. And that's the gift that Sergeant Mabry gave me 30 years ago. And I've never forgotten it after that.
This so speaks to my heart. Growing up in this organization, I started when I was 28 and it was tiny, tiny, like I was employee number 30.
Right.
And, where you do everything. And it is hard to let some of that stuff go. Yeah, it's unheard of for the most part to be in organizations for 20 years, especially running a company.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so great to have that kind of advice. You have to delegate. You have to allow other people to do what they're good at so that you can be a good leader and focus on what is best for the organization, especially if you're not a generalist. I just am listening to a book on the pursuit of a psychologically rich life and through the lens of generalists versus people who really specialize in a role. And I think if you are a specialist and you move into that leadership, it's very hard to say, I'm going to let that go.
There's so much written about leaders saying no versus saying
Yeah.
yes to everything. And I think that's such great advice.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about sustainable momentum because I know you write about this in your book. And I really like this topic because companies, we're going through so much disruption now with everything that's going on geopolitically and tariffs and AI. And we have to create that momentum. But of course, with everything changing, it's a really difficult time to run a business.
Yes.
How do you advise people to build that sustainable momentum? And why do you think it's so important?
A lot of organizations spend a lot of money on having consultants and trainers and even internal resources that are all about trying to drive organizational change and improvement,
Yep.
all kinds of projects and activities, and even the initiatives that some of the things you've identified. I've always had this very strong opinion that it's way too complicated, that we always overcomplicate this.
Yeah.
It actually is as simple as the rate of addition, how fast you're changing and improving has to be greater than the rate of your subtraction. How much are you losing because of retention issues and a lack of adherence to standards or a lack of training and communication? And it always amazes me how the shiny object, the new things that are going on in organizations are pulling our attention, pulling our effort, and pulling especially leadership's desire to focus when a lot of the less glamorous things, the things that were last week's, last month's, last year's news, kind of get neglected. And we're not thinking about that employee who's retiring this year, who's been with us for 30 years, and all of the things they're doing that we're not going to have next year. That loss could easily offset any of the productivity improvements that you gain. So, sustainable momentum is recognizing that it's really about how do you prevent those losses and really thinking about what it takes to successfully sustain a process. And a lot of it has to do with the willingness for people to really understand at the core what has helped that process succeed. It's also about having great standards, having a great systematic way of working, having great cross training so that everyone knows what to do, when to do it. A lot of organizations depend on super people. It's one of the techniques I often use when I visit a site. I hang out for a couple hours and usually they make an appearance. And it's the person who comes to save the day, who we
Yeah.
all depend on and we all need. And thank goodness we have them. And yet again, they've fixed it for us. If you follow them around, they'll show you every leaky process in your organization because they're the permanent kind of patchers who are going around and patching all of the leaks. And if we're going to maintain momentum, it's not just what are we gaining, it's how fast are we losing. And figuring out how you can patch all those leaks, become more systematic, become more cross trained. So it's not just one person we're depending on. Those are all things that you can do in an organization to help you maintain that momentum.
So, how do you go about calculating the rate of addition and the rate of subtraction?
It really comes down to really any metric you would choose. You could look at it and say, we can think of it like listeners, or we can think of it as subscribers. If we look at it like a YouTube thing, that we're adding subscribers, but we're also losing subscribers.
Yeah.
So it isn't really a complex calculation, and it's not something that we got to overcomplicate. What we have to be able to say is it's revenue, it's our costs, it's whatever benefit we would see from your operating system you're putting in place. When you define those, you can easily look at them and say, okay, this new system is going to increase this in this way, but what is the loss that we may experience? Because now this is going to become an automated process. And then the human intervention, which took longer, is no longer going to have that personal touch that has become our brand. So that's my loss versus my gain. And being able to kind of recognize that if I don't understand both sides of that equation, I'm only looking at what I'm getting or what I'm gaining. Most organizations don't realize how leaky their bucket is. They just keep putting water in it.
Mhm. I think it's a really interesting way to look at it. I just recently had my CFO look at a new metric, and I think that it's in alignment with what you're saying here, and that is looking at how compensation is increasing compared to your gross margins. And really that efficiency of, okay, adding headcount or adding expensive headcount. Are you getting more efficient? And what we really determined is that it's always better to pay fewer people more, right? Hire the rock stars and pay them than have a bunch of maybe mediocre performers and have more of them. Because when you're looking at it compared to your gross margins, right, that is a metric that really matters. It just was a really interesting way for me to think about our business around the importance of having stable and improving gross margins, but really growing compensation does on that ratio to say, are we growing effectively and efficiently? So anyway, it was a timely calculation that I had him do for me.
I love this conversation because it's just such great detail. So you take those rock stars and we do that root cause analysis. What was the root cause of their
Yeah.
success? And what we find is that there's a Pareto principle here, that there is some percentage of that is their personality, it's their backgrounds, their knowledge, their experience. But there's another part of it's actually replicatable, that if other people knew how to do it, if
Yeah.
there was cross training with it, or we set the system to reflect our best person and had them own that and really create it, then yes, we can have some very expensive rock stars, but they could have a team of kind of up and coming rock stars
Yeah.
at a fraction of the cost. And that's exactly what we do so often in manufacturing sites, is take those
Yes.
super experienced operators and then take in all those new employees and make them as good as what those super experienced people can do.
Yeah. The whole premise of being a super performer.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's just zoom it out here as we're wrapping things up. So, all of this work that you've done and all the research that you did with your book,
Yeah.
what is the secret to being really successful as a leader?
I think it really comes down to empathy. And in my opinion, the definition of empathy is being able to understand things from another person's perspective. And I know I did this myself. I find myself still doing it because I think it's the human condition that I make decisions based on what I think is best.
Yeah.
And every decision I've ever made, when I thought about what's best for the team, the organization, and the outcomes that we share, it has always been a better decision. But it requires you to make it from that position of empathy, not that position of ego where what do I think? Really, a we versus me.
Great answer. I was not expecting that, and I love that answer. I think it's so unfortunate that we've made empathy into like a bad word
Yes.
when it is literally what makes our lives so much more enriched and connected and
Yes.
meaningful when we understand people and what they're going through and our impact on them and the decisions that we make or the decisions that we don't make, and take into consideration all of the things that they might be going through. I just think it's such a beautiful part of being human.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think in many ways, it's what separates humans. It's what
Yeah.
we really feel for each other. And at our core, we want to help. We want to be a community. And that's what helped us exist. But I do think it's absent today where we don't do enough of it. And as leaders, I think we can do more.
Amen. I'm with you. Okay. Final question before we wrap things up and find out a little bit more about how to find you in your book. The name of this podcast is Reflect Forward. What does Reflect Forward mean to you?
I loved this question. I listened to some of the other episodes, and I love the name of the podcast being Reflect Forward because, in my opinion, it's context, if I made it one word, because our lives are full of context. I have a context of my shared experience, your context of your shared experience. And when we approach things with the context of our experience and are really open-minded to new experiences and to learning and to really having that empathy for others, we have such opportunity to make a difference in the world. But when we go into the world without our context and we don't realize what we may still have lacking or what strengths we're bringing, we are not necessarily going to be as influential and as impactful. So I love the reflect forward. To me, it brought up the term context.
I love it. And it ties back to self-awareness
Yeah,
and why it's just so important to understand yourself. I always tell people like, oh, well, doing all this work, this self-work, it seems like it's selfish. No, the more you understand yourself and how you show up, what your context is, the better leader you can be. Don't ever skimp on the self-work. Yeah.
100%.
George, this has been such a fun conversation. I could talk
Oh,
to you all day. I love the idea of super performance.
thank you.
It's a really great concept.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it.
Yeah. So, how can people find you? And when is the book coming out? I think actually
Yeah.
this podcast will come out right after the book is released. So, it's a little bit about where they can find the book and how they can contact you if they're interested in understanding and how to work with your superpowers.
You can find me at georgepesansky.com. That's my author site. It also is where all of the podcasts and all of the work that I publish is listed. My company is myblendedlearning.com. And we're also on all the social media channels, George Pesansky or My Blended Learning. You can find us in both places there. And of course, Super Performance is going to be out September 23rd or after. And it's anywhere you would find your books, Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, your local bookstores.
I love it. I'll include all that in the show notes. And I have a copy of the book and I have read it. So I got it in advance and it is fantastic. It's just chock full of tips and insights on how to lead yourself well and how to create the environment so that other people can be incredibly successful in your organization as well. So I highly recommend it.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. All right. Hang tight and I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. I hope you enjoyed that interview with George. What a cool, humble guy. I just got so much out of that interview. I got so much out of his book. I highly recommend reading it, especially if you want to be a super performer, which I think most of the people who listen to this podcast probably do. With that, I will leave you to your day. If you like this podcast and you think someone could benefit from this episode, please share it with a friend. And as always, subscribe on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform. Drop me a comment. Write a review. It always helps with the algorithms, and I appreciate it so much. Take care, and we'll see you next week.